want to give my thoughts on Brandon Ingram going to the Raptors. Hawks obviously were in that sweepstakes to try to acquire his services, but it didn't seem to work out. So I'll give my thoughts on that real quick. So basically, here's the deal. If you look at the offer, they gave up Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first and a second. I do not think the Hawks should have tried to outbid that offer. You already have very limited assets. One thing you have to take into mind with this team, San Antonio owns a lot of your draft picks and a lot of your draft capital. And don't forget, we also sent like 5 second-round picks for Sadiq Bey, if you remember that trade with Detroit. So the Hawks did not have a lot of assets at their disposal. Toronto had more assets at their disposal. One thing you heard constantly, Bruce Brown on an expiring deal, that was something the Pelicans wanted. Hawks, if you're thinking bogey in that trade, he has another year plus a player option. I know Clint is the guy who's on the expiring contract, but again, it depends on how much they value Clint. You would think their need for a center would have maybe pushed him in a direction, but clearly they didn't. Obviously, right now for the Hawks, you got to pivot. You have to find other people. A lot of people are going to complain who's out there. Here's the thing in the NBA. What we see and what a lot of you are probably looking at is there's no stars. There's no really good players that you think of. But you can still find value. You can find you a shooter. You can find you a defender. You can find you a playmaker. You can find you guys that you need. Biggest thing the Hawks need right now is bench to me. They got to get a bench. They have no bench. The bench has failed them multiple times, and it's putting a lot of pressure on Trey, Okongwu, Dyson, and Hunter to keep up with the offensive scoring. And so they need to try to find some guys they can add to the rotation, whether that's a backup point guard, another big, a wing. Those are the things you're looking at. Obviously, you would like to find a 4 because of the loss of Jalen Johnson, which is why you got into the Brandon Ingram sweepstakes in the first place. Hawks could also be out on the buyout market after the trade deadline. I fully expect Cody Zeller to be released after the trade deadline tomorrow. So you may see the Hawks go into the buyout market and see what's out there potentially to be picked up because teams will be letting some guys go in that situation. It's obviously tough. I know it's frustrating for a lot of fans who wanted the Hawks to get Brandon Ingram because of the loss. But one thing I've said about this, and I'll say this again here, you only can work with what you have. A lot of people are going to blame Landry for not getting it done. A lot of people are angry with Landry for not getting it done. At the end of the day, it takes 2 to tango. A team has to look at what you're offering them, and they put a value on it to determine if it fits what they want. It's not just Landry just not being a good GM. If a team doesn't like your assets, that's not on him. You know, the team just isn't thinking that the assets that you have is as good as what the other teams can give them, or the other team in this situation. And so I think that, yes, obviously it's disappointing that we couldn't get a deal done, but there's still 15 plus, 14 plus hours for the trade deadline. Hawks can still make a move, can still do some different things. It's not the end of the world. It's just a matter of what that move is going to be and what they're aiming for. So we'll see if we get any reports of the Hawks going for some different guys closer to the deadline. Obviously, I've mentioned, I don't think you can bring Clint back and Bogey back. It's a little awkward at this point since you told them to basically go home and now they're going to come back to the team. That could be a little weird. So I would sit here and think that that's not something they're trying to do, and they're going to try to move them. You know, and obviously, like I said, since we're not going to get a star player unless something comes out of the blue, I think that, you know, like I said, a lot of people are not going to be happy about it, clearly. So I think this is where we are right now. I think a lot of the top Hawks community leaders with me in the community all agree that the Hawks should have not tried to outbid that trade. And like I said, Toronto's a different situation where they can give up more. We're not. And so that's just where we are right now with the Hawks situation. Like I said, I know it's very disappointing for you guys to not get Brandon Ingram, but we just got to continue to move forward. And, you know, it sucks. I understand the saddest state of this team. I understand some people are upset, a little angry, a little emotional. But, you know, you got to – one thing about being a GM – and I feel like sometimes y'all do the trade generators and all that and think it's some easy game. It's not. You have to think about where you are with money, aprons, your team construction. What do you have? Assets, flexibility, the future. There are so many things that you have to think about. It's not just we need a player, make a trade. It's not that easy. You have to consider those things, and you can't say we're going to sell out for a player, but lose flexibility, lose roster construction. Because now you're, especially with no guarantee that Brandon Ingram was going to re-sign with you, you cannot give them a huge offer, lose flexibility, lose assets, and then tell me that we're okay losing Brandon Ingram at the end of the year to what? Try to make a playoff push? You have to be smart. The problem is with some of you is Landry sometimes just will not put this team outside of the DeJounte Murray trade, which that was the time they were aggressive. And they struck out and they missed. It happens. You cannot expect Landry to just strike out and miss, throw everything at Ingram, and then hope for the best. He has to be smart and calculated about these things. Some people may say that the Hawks could have got Brandon Ingram this past summer. Pelicans were in a different situation this past summer. They didn't really want to give Ingram the max. Ingram was like, well, if not, trade me. But it wasn't like a hard, like, get me out of here or we don't want you. It was more of, it seems like it's going to head in this direction, but we're not sure. They let it play out into the season. Obviously, the Pelicans have had a god-awful season, injuries, and Ingram hasn't played a lot. But they clearly sat there and said, now is the time to make the move. And the Hawks got back in the sweepstakes. They wouldn't have been in the sweepstakes if Jalen Johnson didn't get hurt. Let's remember that, too. They wouldn't have even bid for him if Jalen Johnson was healthy. So I think these are all the things we have to keep under consideration when talking about not getting Ingram. And like I said, the Hawks just have to figure it out. It's just life in the NBA. You're not always going to get what you want. I mean, shoot, Suns, we're on the verge of trying to get Jimmy Butler. Couldn't do it. And just, couldn't make things happen. It's just how it is sometimes. So, obviously tough. We'll see what the Hawks do. Obviously leave your thoughts down below on what you think. Obviously, I know some of you are upset just the fact that there was just no moves made. I know since we haven't been active at the trade deadline, a lot of people are just like, we're not going to be active again. We'll see how things go. So.